Welcome to my mid-series thoughts video for Series 2 of Doctor Who. In this video, we're going to cover the Christmas Invasion all the way up to 2-6, which is, I believe, Age of Steel. I always say that I think these aren't going to take very long, and then they take like over an hour. So I'm just going to get straight into this because I feel like this is another one of those situations where hopefully this isn't going to take that long, but it probably will. So going straight in, what I am calling episode 2-0, and I know a lot of other people in the fandom, I guess, call it that as well. And I see why it definitely, and I mentioned this in the initial reaction, feels more like an opener to Series 2 than it does a closing to Series 1. So we're going to go just through some notes here that I have. And if I seem a little off in this video, I do apologize. If you are watching this on Patreon, you know some stuff that's been going on. If you're watching this on YouTube, my dog, who means more to me than most people, has been very, very ill. Ill as in, like, we're doing everything we can to keep her alive, and we're still not sure that it's going to work. So I have been absolutely frazzled, and then I did actually find out this morning that one of my best friends since I was 11 years old passed away. She has been battling a very, very tough degenerative disease for a very long time. So yeah, not quite on my game at the moment, but we're going to power through. So Christmas Invasion. Nothing about the regeneration went the way I expected it to. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect, but I didn't realize that he would be out of commission for so long after he regenerated, which honestly makes it really surprising that he's still alive in general, because I'm guessing he regenerates every time he, almost dies, which means he's in precarious situations, and then he's out of commission when it happens. So it just seems like that's a really vulnerable place for him to be in probably some not some great moments and situations. So I think I'm reading into that a little too much. Maybe I'll find out more about that as I get further along into Classic Who. But yeah, it just surprised me that he was just out for a good chunk of time after he regenerated. So I do like that mostly our journey as a viewer, someone who hadn't seen Classic Who, mirrored Rose's journey, or I should say Rose's journey mirrored ours, of coming to terms with this new doctor. So it's kind of the shock, the denial, the anger, the sadness, and then, obviously finally the acceptance. And it was just kind of another example of how brilliant this show is, and like the writers are, and how much care they put into really making sure that the viewer is like taken care of. I have it in my notes here that it's almost like the writers are like our therapists and they're like gently guiding us through all the stages and all the emotional and confusing things that happen throughout the show. And they're just mirroring or modeling, I guess, what we're going through with the characters in the show, going through those same things. So it was nice to see Rose go through that. Although I will say, as I was watching it, I was getting a little frustrated with Rose, but I think that's because I knew it was coming. I knew regeneration was a thing. That did get spoiled for me on YouTube in the responses to the pilot episode. Well, not really the pilot, but the first episode of Series 1. So like I knew regeneration was a thing, and Rose didn't. Like, it was a total shock for Rose. So I was a little frustrated, but it makes sense. I did actually kind of say this in the episode, but this was the episode where I like officially started to like Mickey, which makes sense considering he left just a few episodes later, of course. I loved the moment where they're being attacked by the Christmas tree, which is a completely ridiculous sentence to say. But Rose whispered into the doctor's ear, like she pleaded in his ear to like help them, and that like snapped him out of it. Even though he wasn't ready to, even though he shouldn't have, that got him out of it. And I thought that was nice to watch. Okay. Oh yeah, I have a note. Adam Garcia. I mean, I pretty much freaked out about him the entire time in this episode, but definitely one of my favorite guest stars. I have no idea how I doubted it was him. He looks exactly the same as he did when I was obsessed with him. But yeah, it was nice to see him in this. The unmasked Sycorax, I think is how you say it. Totally, like when they took off the helmet or whatever, just how they looked gave me like old school Power Rangers villain or like Buffy the Vampire Slayer villain vibes. I don't know, it just had like a very nostalgic look to it to me. Just gave me like some very 90s bad guy monster vibes. I did especially really like the touch where they had the translations suddenly start working, because it was kind of this nice little moment of like, which when I watched back to my reaction, like what I went through was like, oh, I can't understand, can understand. And then like I'm understanding words all of a sudden, but it like took me a second to catch up. And I was like, oh wait, nope, I can tell what you're saying right now. And so that was a nice little touch of a way to signify that like the doctor was getting better, and that he would be making an appearance soon, most likely, without like being so overt about it. Yeah, I just genuinely enjoyed that as a viewer. Ooh, okay. Yeah. So I have a note here that I also really love Harriet's line when the doctor comes out and she says, well, what happened to my doctor? And I feel like that seems like it was a really intentional word choice, because that's what it felt like to me as a viewer. You guys know how I feel about Christopher Eccleston and the Ninth Doctor. And it definitely felt like he was my doctor. I mean, he's the first one I experienced. And that's the case for everyone else who started watching this, here with NuWho and didn't watch Classic Who. Or I should say they started watching, they came in series 1 of NuWho. But yeah, I mean, Christopher feels like my doctor. And so it was just a nice little word choice there that I really appreciated. That whole scene there with the doctor kind of, his whole monologue throughout all of that, when he comes out and he's like figuring out who he is a really nice touch. It's what made me start to really kind of get on board with that doctor. And it was nice because it was a way of giving us information as the viewer, letting us know that like, here's all the ways that he's changed. Here's the ways that he doesn't know that he's changed yet. Like, he's going to be different, but still the same. And it was just a really nice way of walking us through a lot of that explanation without it being just like very cut and dry and boring, or, just kind of like generic dialogue between the characters. Like, it was a nice, interesting way of getting all of that information across to us as a viewer. Okay. So I have a note here, which I can't remember if I mentioned it in the original reaction, but it's that I was not expecting the conflict between Harriet and the doctor at the end. I totally thought that was going to be a nice little sweet ending and they were going to part as friends. I definitely was not expecting that kind of like blowout between them. And honestly, like, I'm not crazy about it. I really liked that relationship between Harriet and the doctor. And they seemed like they had a special bond and she really cared for the doctor. And I don't know, just something about that interaction I wasn't crazy about. Like, I didn't want that relationship to be ruined. But it definitely created some nice tension, and gave us some insight into who this new doctor is. So, I mean, I feel like maybe it was necessary, and we definitely, we got some Torchwood stuff out of it. But yeah, I was a little upset. Well, not upset, just it just wasn't my favorite that they had them end up kind of having a little dispute there at the end. I loved getting to see the closet in the TARDIS. You have heard me talk about wanting to see other rooms in the TARDIS basically since the very beginning. I think I talked about it maybe in episode 1. And so it was nice getting to see this different room. I was excited for that. And I have since learned that I guess some of those other clothes that it kind of highlighted were from Classic Who and what some of the other doctors were. And now that I know that, when I went to go watch this to take the notes, I think I recognized the first doctor's pants. I think he kind of pulls them out and like, it's like the first thing that he sort of like pulls out of the rack or whatever. And so I think, but like Classic Who's in black and white, at least what I'm watching right now. And so like, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that those were the pants. So let me know, confirm or correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, I think that was it. Those were all my notes for the Christmas Invasion episode. Sorry, I told you I'm off my game tonight. We're just going to go with it. Okay, so episode 2-1, the official start to series 2, New Earth. I'm not going to lie, which I was totally honest about this in the reaction itself, but I was not crazy about this episode. And I don't necessarily think it was the episode so much because I like the idea of it, of like using the humans, basically like breeding humans just to have them as like test subjects or whatever, so that they can cure diseases. So it's like you're completely destroying some humans to save some others. And like, I like the complexity of all that and how disturbing that idea is. But I didn't really like this episode that much. And I think honestly, maybe it was more that it was placed in the wrong spot, I think. This did not feel like a good series opener to me. And I honestly was annoyed that like our first full episode with Rose and the 10th Doctor, like being together, like on the same team or like on the same page, I guess, it wasn't even Rose throughout the vast majority of the episode. So, because like, I mean, in Christmas Invasion, she spent most of the time going through all of those emotions. And then finally there at the very end, she accepted it, and he said something like, oh, so I'm the Doctor now. And she's like, you get no argument for me. Like that didn't happen until the end. And so we didn't really get that much with them together again and like forming this new bond as Rose and the 10th Doctor. And so I was really excited to go into the first episode of series 2 and get that. And then I kind of didn't. And so it was a little bit of a letdown. It was a little frustrating, a little annoying. I needed that as a viewer. This was one of the few times that so far the show has let me down a little bit and the writers have let me down a little bit in terms of them anticipating what the viewer needs. I needed more Rose and 10th Doctor time. I needed more bonding relationship, establishing that relationship, and I didn't get it. And so I kind of didn't care about anything that was happening in the episode because I wasn't getting what I really needed. So I think if this episode had been placed at a different time, so Tooth and Claw, I thought was great with their bonding. They were really clicking. They were joking. They had, inside jokes and they were like betting with each other. That was great. I would have preferred it almost if these had been flipped. I think I would have liked this episode better had that been the case. Okay, so a good thing about this episode, which I did mention this a couple of times very briefly. I didn't really elaborate much on it, but I think Billy did a phenomenal job in this episode. And I said in the episode, like, oh, she's doing great playing another character. And that wasn't really specific and it wasn't quite accurate. I think she did a really good job of playing Cassandra specifically, Cassandra inside Rose. So it wasn't just that Billy was playing another character. I mean, actors can play another character. That's not really a big deal. She was playing an already established character with their own thoughts and mannerisms and way of speaking and all of those things. And that's way more difficult to do as an actor, I think, is to portray a character that someone else has already portrayed and still do it in a way that's believable. And I think she did a really, really good job with that. And especially like when she was flipping back and forth between Cassandra and Rose, there was only like one time in the episode where I wasn't sure who it was. Like I thought it was supposed to be Cassandra, but it seemed a little more Rose. There's only one time that happened and it was sort of towards the end. And, but other than that, like she did great flipping back and forth. It was really obvious who she was supposed to be in that moment. And yes, I'm bringing this up. Supernatural. Supernatural actually does this quite a lot where you have different actors portraying the same character. And there are some great examples of it in there, but there are also some really bad examples. And by some of the leads even. And it really takes you out of the moment when they're portraying a character that you already know pretty well and they're not doing a great job. Like they're making it their own instead of trying to follow what's already been established. And it's just not, it takes you out of the moment of the show. So it also makes me really appreciate when someone can do that very well, which I think Billy did. Okay, so Cassandra. I did talk about it a little bit at the end of the initial reaction to this episode. I did not ever need to see her again. And it wasn't because I didn't like her. Like she was a great villain. And I enjoyed the episode that she was in originally. So it's not that I just never wanted to see that character again. It's just I felt that character story was complete, at least for me. She wasn't a big enough character for me that I needed her to come back. And I certainly didn't need her to have any sort of a redemption arc where I'm supposed to feel sorry for her because she was great as what she was. She was great at the villain that she was supposed to be in, in her original episode, which I believe was series 1, episode 2. And I didn't need her to be any different or any better. I didn't need to feel sorry for her. I didn't need to connect with her. And I didn't in this episode. And I think you're supposed to by the end. I think that's supposed to be a really sweet or sad moment at the end. And I just genuinely did not really care. She didn't need to come back. And also I was a little annoyed with her sudden acceptance of dying at the end. She, in both episodes, all of these years, she has fought to stay alive in every way possible. And all through this episode, she fought to stay alive. And then, in an instant, she was okay with dying. And I guess you could kind of say maybe it's because she went into one of the people. I don't remember if they had a specific name, but one of the people who had been infected and, talking about how they were so alone and all those things. So I guess maybe you could use that to explain why she had this change. But I mean, I still don't feel like that makes sense because she was literally she went into his body there at the end because she didn't want to die. She was still fighting to survive. And then it was 2 seconds later, he's dying and, oh, I'm okay with it. And it just kind of gave me whiplash and just wasn't really that believable. So that also kind of took me out of it. And I was just I don't care. I don't care about you or your journey and being okay with dying or any of that. So maybe I'm being overly critical of this episode, but it just was not one of my favorites. Okay, so now on to one that is one of my favorites. Episode 2, Tooth and Claw. I was pretty clear about this while I was watching it, but I loved this episode. It's one of my favorites so far, between the darker aesthetic, the supernatural creature rather than an alien. They were in Scotland, which I love. It's about a queen, which I love, historical dramas about royal families. We got a bit of the origins of Torchwood. What's not to love about this episode? Other than the weird ninja thing, ninja monks, or whatever they were. I think they were ninja monks. That's kind of odd, but whatever. I loved basically everything about this episode. So I have had someone tell me that this was David Tennant's real accent. And it's so funny because I almost commented in the video how I thought he was doing great at having a Scottish accent. But I didn't say it because I wasn't sure if it was actually awful and I was just being an ignorant American. So it's funny that I thought he was doing a great accent because it was just his. But I didn't know that he was Scottish, and so that's really awesome. Okay, I left out a line here, and it's been a while since I watched this one. I have a note about there's something of the wolf about you or something like that. And I'm unsure if it's a reference to the events of series 1 or if there's more to that story, but I still, from series 1, and I think I'm just reading too much into it, they kept talking to Rose about this darkness, which I talked about it in my mid-series 1 thoughts video. And so I'm just reading through my notes here because I didn't word this very well, and so I'm trying to gather my thoughts. So there were those references in a few episodes to about there being this darkness arose, or the word darkness was used, and I mentioned that in my thoughts video. And I don't feel like it was in reference to the finale of series 1 because that was kind of the opposite of darkness. She was literally glowing light. And so I think I am just reading too much into this, but there was also talking about there's something of the wolf about you and that's nighttime and darkness and all these things. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but I feel like there's a lot of things with this show. They plant some seeds, and I don't know if the seeds are going to carry over from series to series or if everything kind of stays contained within that series. So just ignore these ramblings if it doesn't come to anything. Okay, I also really like the shot with the werewolf howling in front of the moon. Yes, it's a cliched shot, but it was still really beautiful and cool, so I like that they included it. So, kind of along the same vein as Harriet and the Doctor in Christmas Invasion, I was not expecting the shift in the Queen's attitude at the end of this episode. I really kind of thought this would like bring them together and she would soften a little bit and again have this special connection with the Doctor. Nope. That kind of caught me off guard. Again, not super crazy about it, but yeah, I don't know. It caught me off guard, which probably it shouldn't have. She was pretty standoffish throughout most of the episode, but I just wasn't expecting it to go like shift that much and that quickly. And then my last note for this episode is that the final scene made it seem like Torchwood's actually a bad thing, which going into this series, like series 2, I only knew about Torchwood, which I think I explained in the Christmas Invasion reaction, that Torchwood is an anagram for Doctor Who, and that the actress who plays Gwyneth is in it, but she's not playing Gwyneth. And now I know that Captain Jack is in it as well, which is good because I've been wondering where the hell he is. And that is very adult in nature. I don't know what is adult about it. It has not been elaborated on. I'm excited to find out. But that's it. That's what I know. So this episode made it seem like Torchwood is going to be a bad thing for the Doctor, which I was not expecting that. So I'm curious to see how that unfolds throughout the rest of this series and then going into the start of Torchwood, which, speaking of, I guess this is a good time to explain. As of the time that I am recording this video, which if you're watching this on YouTube was several months ago, well, most likely, I am going to react to at least the pilot for both Torchwood and Sarah Jane Adventures. And then we're going to go from there and see if I like them enough to continue. But I will be reacting to at least the pilot episodes once I wrap up Series 2. But before I go into Series 3, I believe is the proper placement. Please correct me if I am wrong on that. If you're watching this on Patreon, because if you're watching it on YouTube, it'll be too late and I've already recorded it. But if you're on Patreon, please correct me if that is not the proper placement for when I should watch those. And a fun little fact, along with my love of Scotland, which I would move to tomorrow if I could. But I do actually technically have official use of the title of Lady. I did, buy into like one of the restoration projects or whatever. And so, yeah, I have my deed for the little piece of land that I own. And yeah, I can technically officially use the title of Lady, which is just a fun little side thing that most people don't know. Okay. All right. So episode 3, school reunion. Oh, I have a note here that it was a really cool transition, like the fade between the child's scream and like the bell in the opening scene. I thought that was really nicely done. Okay. Yeah. So when the Doctor and Sarah Jane were talking, there's a line of everyone else is dead. And so I'm curious who everyone else is. Was he referring to other Time Lords or other companions that she may have known? I think it's other Time Lords. Like he's just talking about basically his entire race being wiped out. But I don't know. There was something about that made me think it could have maybe meant something else. And then there also was the exchange between Sarah Jane and Rose, where Rose is like, I'm not his assistant. And she says, give it time. I want to know more about that. Basically, I just really am excited to get to Sarah Jane's time in Classic Who, because I feel like a lot of this is going to be answered when I see how that all progresses. But there's definitely some history there, and I want to know it, and I'm impatient. But obviously, no spoilers. So there's a line. You can spend the rest of your life with me, but I can't spend the rest of mine with you. That was a gut punch right to the feels, and is another one of my favorite lines so far. Like, it's just beautifully written, beautifully delivered. Love it. Okay. So I love the tension in the pool scene where they're inches from each other. And it was really cool how they started so far apart. And by the end, they were like so close, just inches. And they were like, as they were getting closer, the conversation was getting more intense. It just was really, really fantastic, like tension building and timing. And that whole scene was just done really well. Oh, yeah. So there's a line in this one, and it says, everything has its time and everything ends. And I feel like if they don't end the show with that line, it's going to be a missed opportunity and I will be very disappointed. But there are probably other lines that you could say that about as well that I just haven't got to. Yeah. So I also have a note here about Sarah Jane telling Rose to find her if she needs to one day. And I'm just kind of curious if that's like foreshadowing for when Rose leaves the show, and had me wondering if Rose made an appearance on Sarah Jane Adventures. So I'm curious if that happens. I know Sarah Jane Adventures ended abruptly, obviously. And so even if she's not, maybe at one point she was. I know nothing about Rose not being on the show. I don't know if she dies. I don't know if she leaves on her own. I don't know if she goes onto the Sarah Jane Adventures. I have literally no idea what happens and why Rose isn't on the show anymore. And I hope that it stays that way. Obviously, I don't even know when she leaves. So yeah, that just had me curious if Sarah Jane saying something or saying that had something to do with Rose leaving. But again, I could be reading way too much into it. Oh, oh yeah. Weird little side note here. That Sarah Jane and the doctor reminds me of Hugh Hefner and his girlfriend, Barbie Benton. I don't know why. Just like, he's just like this older person. She's this younger brunette, wide-eyed. And then you have Rosen, who's like this young blonde. And it just, if you know anything about Hugh Hefner, especially if you watch The Girls Next Door, which is one of my guilty pleasure shows, then it just, that whole scenario just totally reminded me of Hugh Hefner and Barbie Benton with like his new young blonde girlfriends. That probably makes sense to almost none of you, but if you know what I'm talking about, hopefully it makes sense. So episode 4, The Girl in the Fireplace. Another one of my favorite episodes so far, in case it wasn't obvious. I'm pretty sure I said that in the reaction. Another one where I loved almost everything about it. The concept of like the different gateways and to different times in her life, just the general time period that it took place in, the actress, the story, the setting, the costumes. I loved it all. And so I have a note here, which is so funny. I said, I don't know what it is about the character or the actress, but I was instantly both sold on the connection between her and the doctor and on board with it. Well, now I know that they were dating in real life. So that makes sense that there's a connection there. They definitely sold it. I bought it instantly. So I feel like hopefully the relationship was a good one. There was definitely some chemistry. She was also one of my favorite one-off characters so far. And I mean, even Rose liked her, which is saying a lot, given Rose's general attitude toward most of the females on the show. She was jealous, but she did still like her. And I feel like, how could you not? She just was amazing. Yeah, I still don't understand why there was a horse. So he opened the doors and said, so this is where you came from, eh, horsey? And like, it was the grounds of, I'm not really sure, were they supposed to be at Versailles? I'm not really sure where they were supposed to be, but that was just like a whole weird thing. And maybe it was like just a plot device to get him back where he could overhear the conversation. Yeah. Okay. So I am super intrigued by her line of Doctor Who. It's more than just a secret, isn't it? I don't know what that means. And I want to know what that means because she could see into his head. Like she could see basically everything about him, it seems like. So she knows things about him that seemingly no one else does. So that line really makes me want to know. And that whole scene, honestly, yeah, I said, I love this whole scene. It makes me sad she was only in this one episode. Yeah, that whole scene, like she did brilliantly in it. Everything about it, like it was so good. Like just the shot, the scripts, the actors, just everything about it. It's one of my favorite scenes so far from the show. And again, without knowing at the time they were dating, the chemistry was just really good between them during that. Okay, so I have a note here, but I almost forget what it's about. I think I remember. So I have a note that says, I loved how they had Renette say, could everyone just calm down as the transition since the doctor was getting worked up? I don't remember what that's in reference to. But apparently I liked it. So if you remember, I remember when she says it. I just don't remember what the doctor was doing at the time. Oh, yeah. I really wish that I could have like let the music play in the reaction during the final scene between Renette and the doctor, because it reminded me of like a child's music box. And it was like whimsical and beautiful, and like it fit like the scene and especially the episode so well. And what's funny is Ian on Patreon, I think it was you that said this. I think you even referred to this episode as whimsical, and is why like one of the reasons you weren't so crazy about it. But that's what I love about it, is that it is whimsical, and that was the exact word that I had already had in my notes to describe. So apparently, I'm describing it accurately. It was strange to me to see how completely he forgot about Rose when he was with Renette, because Rose has been obviously really, really special to him so far, throughout all of series 1, throughout series 2 so far. But when he was with Renette, it was almost like nothing else existed. It was just him and her. And when he thought he was trapped, when he thought he was trapped there with her, he didn't say a thing about Rose or the people he left behind or anything like that. Like he was just kind of accepting that he was there with her. And he also rushed his reunion with Rose to get back to Renette, which is understandable given how quickly time progressed when he was, in the ship, as opposed to like actually there with her. How much time passes between like the visits or whatever, but still he rushed that reunion when he thought he was never going to see her again. And then he did. And he just wanted to hurry up and get back to Renette. My next note is that this show's great with the gut punches because, him turning off the fireplace at the end was just like twisting the knife. It was already sad, but just him turning that off was just a really, really nice, heartbreaking touch. And I'm not quite sure how he was able to do that from inside the TARDIS, but whatever. I'm just gonna go with it. And then the last note that I have, which will make sense here in a second, that's why I say that, I still am not 100% sure the significance of like why it had to be her. So I know that the ship or whatever was named after her. Is that literally all there is to it? It just was named after her. Someone randomly chose this name, and they're like, "Oh, it's got to be her." It's like, is that it? Because I feel like there needs to be more to it than that. So I guess, maybe that's it. So the other comment that I have, I actually want to read this one. It's from 1234WC on Patreon, and I hadn't even thought of it this way, and I just want to read it. So they said this episode is an absolute favorite of mine. I knew you were going to break your streak and cry at the end. It is so affecting. It goes through everything the Doctor feels when he meets someone who connects with the excitement, companionship, and loss all in one episode. Everyone he meets feels as fleeting as Renette to the Doctor. And then there's some other stuff to the comment. But that's the piece I really wanted to highlight because I obviously didn't pick up on that when I watched it the first time, but they're absolutely right. Like, this is everything about his relationship with the companion, like all crammed into one episode. And we get the whole journey, which I really like. It didn't feel rushed. Like, their bond still felt deep and real. And you could tell that they both really cared for each other. And it was like they had a lifetime of connection. That was all totally believable in this episode, which I feel is like a really, really difficult thing to do. And I think it was the chemistry between them that helped sell it. But I mean, it was also the writing. It was everything. And it was interesting to see from meeting, the Doctor meeting Renette for the very first time as a little girl and saving her as he tends to do, and all these different times that he came back to visit and we saw her life progress to the end when he lost her. And it was really nice to think about it that way. And so I really appreciated that perspective. Yeah, those are all my thoughts for that episode. All right, so episode 2-5. This was another cool sound design episode, especially the first shot that the Zeppelins are in. I had to silence it to like help avoid copyright infringement, but definitely, I mentioned it in a different scene later in the episode, but that one was especially good. So if you're going to rewatch this, I suggest doing it with headphones because this was a good one for that. I have a note here that I still think his breath has magical properties. Which I mentioned all the way back in series 1, episode 2. I was really confused because he was breathing on everyone, and I was like, does his breath like have magical properties to it? And so he was like, no, it's just what he's doing. But I think it does, because he breathed on the light and it helped to charge it. So if it doesn't, I feel like that's weird. Okay, speaking of breathing onto this light, he says he just gave away 10 years of his life. And that brought up a whole crap ton of questions for me. So like, how long would his lifespan be if he didn't regenerate? Will there be a point when he can no longer regenerate? And not because like he's too injured or damaged, but just like, can he go on doing that forever? Or do Time Lords die of old age at some point and they can't regenerate anymore? Could all the other Time Lords regenerate, or was it just him? And it sounded like, if I remember in the end of series 1, he says that it's like, he says Time Lords plural, or like that they can do it. But if they could, then did some choose to just die rather than regenerate? Like, is that how that happened? Like, do you just choose that you don't want to regenerate anymore? Like, all the and still, like, why didn't some people regenerate and try and get out when the Time War happened? So many questions that I don't know that I will ever get answers to, but I want them. And that was all just from like one freaking line of dialogue. And again, don't answer those questions if I'm going to find them out at some point, either in Classic Who or NuWho. Okay. And then my only other note for this episode, honestly, because like it felt like a 2-parter to me. So like most of the episodes came at the end. So this note here is that I love how they did the shot in the scene with Mickey and Rose leaving, with the doctor literally being in the middle and like looking at both of them, and he has to like make a choice and decide who to follow. It just was a really nice visual representation of their group dynamic, because yeah, given the choice between Mickey and Rose, he's going to choose Rose every single time. And it was just nice to have that played out visually. It was just a nice touch. That's all. Okay, so episode 2-6, Age of Steel, which honestly I feel like it's kind of wrapped with 2-5, because like I said, this was a 2-parter. And so like it felt like how I did episodes 4 and 5 in series 1. So these episodes were definitely heavy on the social commentary, media consumption, allowing yourself to be controlled, even how they walked right into the factory, or whatever it was, like they were mindless cattle, like all kinds of things in this episode, that Doctor Who likes to touch on. I commented in the reaction for 2-5 how different they looked, but while editing 2-6, it clicked that they could look different because they aren't the same exact Cybermen from Classic Who. What I saw in 1-6 and Dalek. And I mean, they're this universe's version, so of course they're probably not going to look exactly the same. It makes complete sense that they would look different. And so I would be curious to see the design of them if they came back in NuWho into our universe. And again, don't tell me if they do, but would they look like the ones from this episode or these 2 episodes, because like they already had those costumes made up, or would they look closer to the ones from Classic Who, which I haven't seen yet, but I mean, I did see at least the head of one in Dalek. So the next note I have here is that in the reaction, I was confused about like, are they robots just with human organs inside? Or is it like a suit over their entire body? And we did a Zoom hangout call for superfans on Patreon, and we actually talked about this. And it did seem like the general consensus was that it does seem more like it's robots with organs. And apparently that's different from how they were in Classic Who. I haven't made it to Classic Who yet. So that was just an interesting discussion that we had. And it does kind of seem like that's how it was. So my question was sort of answered. Yeah. Yet again, this show had me tearing up over robots or metal aliens or whatever the hell you want to call them. And that's obviously in reference, of course, to Sally, who, was the night before a wedding. And then also the one looking into the mirror and crying. That was another one that kind of got to me. Like, that, it was just horrible. It was horrible, but in a really entertaining way. So the end of this, Ian on Patreon, you commented about, like, basically it was kind of easy to defeat them. And I have to agree. It did seem a little easy, a little rushed, a little confusing. I didn't quite understand how they defeated them, or like why that worked. It was one of those things that I just kind of like went with. But yeah, it didn't quite. When we got to that point, I was just like, oh, okay, I guess this is what we're doing now. Oh, it worked. All right, cool. Like that was just kind of how that went. I am glad though that Mickey, his leaving. I'm glad that he had this like big hero moment. He's had some smaller ones, but this was his time to shine. And that he was having fun with it. And I'm also glad that his leaving was by choice and not because, and like for something wholesome, and not because like he got killed off or left behind. Now, I mentioned in the reaction that I don't know that Mickey's actually gone. I have to shift. Because it's Doctor Who. And even though they said multiple times like that he could never come back or they could never go back, I don't know that I believe that. I feel like there's definitely a way that they could figure it out. So I don't necessarily believe that Mickey has gone for good, but I'm taking it as he is. They've told me he's gone for good, so I'll take that for what it's worth. I just won't be super shocked if he comes back. But I liked that it was on his terms and that he has a place now where he feels like he belongs rather than just has always been left behind, even though he's being left behind again, but it's his choice this time. And then he gets his grandma back. That was definitely a heartbreaking thing I was not expecting in this episode. But yeah, no, it was a good send-off for his character, and I'm glad that it was done in that way. Yeah, Rose's reaction to him leaving just like further cements the whole like she wants what she can't have sort of a thing. And that she took Mickey for granted because she definitely like she was annoyed at Mickey like joining them at first. And she had, she was definitely quick to leave him behind. There were a lot of moments in the show where she didn't really seem to even care like about him or that he was there. She could take him or leave him. She just wanted him to know that she could have him, those sorts of things. And then she had this like really big reaction to him staying behind and that she was like devastated, which I bought, but it just, definitely was like, okay, you're really upset because now you aren't going to get to have him anymore in whatever way that you want to have him in your life. So whatever. And then my last note for this episode was that I want a Mickey Jake spinoff, which seems crazy. I really liked Jake a lot. And I have heard that there is a deleted scene between Jake and Ricky. I'm going to try and find that and do a reaction to it. I don't know that it's worth it. Like if it's a quick scene and there's not much to react to, I won't post it, but I am going to go at least watch it. Probably after I finish this. But yeah, I really enjoyed Jake, and it's crazy that I want a Mickey spinoff. If you had told me that was going to happen when I watched Rose, when I watched, series 1, episode 1, I would have thought you were crazy. But it's just goes to show how good the show is and how they can develop characters and get you to think about characters that you found really annoying and totally didn't want around in the very beginning. So yeah, I only have one more note here, and it's just kind of a general note. In the first series, there were those hints of Bad Wolf throughout. So far in series 2, there have been hints of Torchwood and mentions of Torchwood. So I'm curious, is this something they do in every series? Don't tell me, because I'm not 100% certain that I would have caught on to them mentioning Torchwood so many times if I didn't know that the Torchwood spinoff existed. And so like for these future series, if this does happen, I don't want to know because I want to see how long it takes me to catch on. But I am curious if this is something they do every series. So I guess I'll find out in series 3. All right, that's going to wrap up this one. It actually is on the shorter side. It's only like a little under 50 minutes at the moment, so that's good. I think my last one was like an hour 15 or something. Again, sorry that my thoughts were kind of jumbled on this one. I'm not on my A game. Just a little frazzled right now with everything that's been going on. But I really appreciate you being here with me and being supportive. And yeah, just going on this journey with me and caring what I think and have to say about Doctor Who, which just seems crazy. But I really enjoy getting to connect with all of you and talk about this stuff. So, all right, that's going to wrap up this one. Thank you for being here. If you're watching this on Patreon, thank you so much for the support. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching it on there as well. The more people that watch, the more YouTube will recommend it to other people. So that's always good. And no matter what platform you are watching this on, just thank you in general for being here, and hopefully I will see you in another video.